Hello, this is Eddie, aka Durio 1000, aka a solo tripper, with a very special video. Today's date is January the 6th, 2023. I want to thank you for joining me. Now today, I want to talk about several topics, but it's going to focus on one main theme, and that is the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. All right. Before I get into the video, I want to take a moment to tell you that this is going to be different than the other videos. This video is about a subject that I'm very passionate about. Let's get started. Sam Bankman-Fried. He's the founder of the now defunct, bankrupt crypto exchange FTX. FTX was started in 2019. Now FTX went bankrupt late last year. I'm sorry. FTX was not the first crypto exchange to go bankrupt or insolvent or defunct. Back in 2014, there was another crypto exchange called Mt. Gox. And Mt. Gox did the same thing. They took customers' money and they ran off with the funds. All right. This story repeats itself throughout history. Either a trusted entity takes people's money and run, or a trusted entity keeps giving out their own currency and keeps devaluing that currency. All right, so FTX is nothing new. All right, the only thing new are the names. Okay, you had Mark Karpels back in 2014 with the Mt. Gox. You have Sam Bankman-Fried 2022 with FTX. It's going to happen over and over and over again. It's nothing new. All right, it's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to happen next week, next month, next year. Somebody is going to be defrauded. All right. So, what can we do, or what can we learn from this? Obviously, people did not learn from 2014. They're probably not going to learn from 2022. But if you're watching this video, I want you to learn. Or at least in the future, when it happens to you, you can't say Eddie didn't warn me. Okay? So, we have a history of people stealing people's funds. All right? Now, Americans do not like thieves. All right? What happened with FTX is the same thing that happened with Mt. Gox. And what essentially happened is somebody gave FTX and Mt. Gox their money, and then they came back and said, hey, I need my money. And FTX and Mt. Gox was like, no, we don't have your money. Your money's gone. Or they were like, hey, let me get my money. They're like, come back tomorrow. Next day, let me get my money. We don't have your money. Okay, lawsuit. Okay, jail. It's the same shit day in and day out. All right, so let's talk about how he did it, how it always happens. Again, this is nothing new. Somebody says, hey, we'll pay you 5% interest, 10% interest, 20% interest on your money. Just give us your money. And then they say, okay, here's our money. Here's our crypto. And then before you know it, it might be 1 month, it might be 2 years, or it might be 30 years, or it might be 100 years down the road. They say we need our money and they don't have the money. Okay? So, Americans don't like thieves. Another, if you don't like Sam Bankman-Fried stealing money, then why the hell do we let the Federal Reserve steal our money? The Federal Reserve has been stealing our money since inception, since 1913. And the same thing again, it's been happening year after year after year. Every time you hear inflation, that means the Federal Reserve is stealing our money. Now you might think that, oh, I still have my money in my pocket. They're not stealing it from me. Yes, they are. Just because you have your money in your pocket does not mean that that same dollar is not yesterday's dollar. Right? When the Federal Reserve prints money, they're making your money less valuable. They're making your money less scarce. Not more scarce, less scarce. That is the problem. That is how the Federal Reserve has been stealing money since 1913. Now, a lot of you all might like Donald Trump. Donald Trump is nowhere near as good as Andrew Jackson. Nowhere near as good as Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson abolished the central bank. Abolished the central bank. There's no way any president of today's time will even consider abolishing the central bank. And you know what happened when Andrew Jackson tried to abolish the central bank? Andrew Jackson abolished the central bank, or the Federal Reserve at the time, back in 1863. He said no. And when word got around that he was strongly against the central bank at that time, the central bank did everything to fight Andrew Jackson. Now, in today's time, the same thing is happening. Again, history always repeats itself. All right? So, Andrew Jackson tried to stop the central bank of that time. The central bank did everything in its power to prevent or to persuade Andrew Jackson from doing so. But Andrew Jackson overcame that obstacle and shut down the central bank in 1836. All right? Now, in today's time, you have the Federal Reserve, but you have different names. Anybody who tries to fight the Fed today, well, first of all, let's talk about us as citizens before we get into fighting the Federal Reserve. Let's understand the basic concept of how they're stealing our money. Basic concepts, how the power of the Federal Reserve, and the basic concept is they have the ability to print money out of thin air. Okay, that's one of the bullets that the Federal Reserve has. They have the power to print money out of thin air. All right, that's one power. And every time they print money, your money, everything that you work for, is stolen from you. You worked 30 hours last week. Your 30 hours last week is worth 10 hours this week in Federal Reserve currency. That's how they're stealing your money. Every time they print money, your past efforts gets reduced. You're saving up for that house, but the house price is going up. Right? That is simply them stealing your money. They call it inflation. It's theft. That's what it is. It's simple, plain and simple. It's theft. All right? So, they have that way of fucking stealing your money. Another way that they have of stealing your money is raising interest rates. The Federal Reserve prints out money And then when it's time for them to get their money back, they say, yo, I need that money back with interest. So that's why you have credit cards. The interest rates of your credit cards going up. The interest rate for your loan, your mortgage is going up. It's theft. Plain and simple, it's theft. Now, people have a feeling something's not right, but they don't know exactly what it is. On the internet, you see people talking about term limits for congressmen. You see people talking about, let's see what the Fed is going to do with interest rates. Let's check out the jobs report. The Federal Reserve is the core of the problems that we face today. The core. Now, before I know I was about to tell you how the Federal Reserve is fighting today. But it's the same way that they fought Andrew Jackson back then. They put all their resources against Andrew Jackson. Okay? Now today, they put all their resources against me and you and those who oppose them. The Federal Reserve, they print money out of thin air, so they control everything. They control the media, which is the most important. They control everything. They control the media. They control the medical. They control your money. They control you. You get out there and work to pay your mortgage. Mortgage rate keep going up. Dollar keeps going down. People talking about inflation. Inflation can't exist without deflation. Both exist. It's like a seesaw. Inflation, something goes up, something's coming down. House price rising, the dollar is losing value. It's losing value because they are printing more of the dollar out of thin air. And then when there's too many dollars out there, inflation gets too high, they say, oh, we need to bring back in those dollars. And you know how they bring back in those dollars? They raise interest rates. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. So today, the Federal Reserve fights by using the FBI. They fight by using the IRS. They fight by using the media. They control what you see. They control every outlet. This is why the cancel culture is so strong. You can't say certain things because of the Federal Reserve. That's the core of the problem. They control everything. They control social media. They control your TV. They control the news channels. They control everything because we, as Americans, gave them the power of the Federal Reserve Act in 1913, which is unconstitutional. The Constitution says only Congress has the power to coin money. Only Congress. No one else. Only Congress has the power to coin money. The Federal Reserve is unconstitutional. And until you wake up, until you stop letting these thieves, these fews, steal your money, it's just going to keep going. It's a cycle. The Federal Reserve is no better than Sam Bankman-Fried. It's the same. Sam Bankman-Fried is a smaller version of the Federal Reserve. Sam Bankman-Fried is the infant of the Federal Reserve. Banks need to fail. Exchanges fail. When a customer loses their money, as bad as it may seem, that exchange goes out of business, it's done with. But the thing about the Federal Reserve, it can't go out of business. We can't have a bank run on the Federal Reserve like we should be able to. We can't take our notes, our Federal Reserve notes, and say, hey, pay up. I need my whatever. I need my silver, or I need my gold. We can't go to the Fed and do that. Therefore, the Fed cannot go out of business. The only way to put the Fed out of business is to end the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. That's the only way. Period. If you don't do that, they're going to keep stealing our money, stealing your money, and we'll be slaves of the Federal Reserve. Now, let me put in this point. I love money just like anybody else loves money. I'm a capitalist. However, the Federal Reserve has a monopoly. The Federal Reserve is corrupt. The Federal Reserve is stealing your money. The only way to end the Federal Reserve is to end the Federal Reserve Act of 1913. It's unconstitutional. Prior to 1913, Americans did not like central banks. You know why Americans did not like central banks? Because central banks, even before the Federal Reserve, they ended up having too much power and had the ability to control all of America. That's too much power, and old Americans of the past said no. Again, central banks, if they have the power to print their own money, their own currency out of thin air, they will do it endlessly. That is power. That is corruption. Now, I'm not saying that, once the Federal Reserve is gone, that corruption will end. No, I'm not saying that at all. Because corruption now is here, and tomorrow there will be corruption. The problem with the Federal Reserve is that they can't go out of business. They can be as corrupt as they want without going out of business. FTX Exchange is out of business. They went bankrupt. They won't be stealing anybody else's money. Sam Bankman-Fried going to jail. Federal Reserve, they've been stealing the money for hundreds of years. Not hundreds. But since 1913, no one from the Federal Reserve has gone to jail. Competition. Federal Reserve has no competition. And when there is no competition, the user, the retail person, the American will get the short end of the stick. Competition is good. But competition is dwindling. When there's no competition, users get fucked. Consumers get fucked. There's only one Walmart in your area. That Walmart can, if there are no other businesses in the area besides that Walmart can fuck you. That Walmart can make you wait in line for 30, 45 minutes, an hour. You know why? Because there's no competition. No competition means the user, the customer, gets the short end of the stick. I don't want the short end of the stick. Now, I'm not saying Walmart shouldn't exist. Let Walmart exist. Let Walgreens exist. Let mom and pop exist. America is against monopolies. So there are several grounds on how the Federal Reserve is unconstitutional. Let's go back to competition. When there's competition, if they had several different banks, one bank over here, and they issue out their species that's backed by silver, another one issues out their species backed by gold, another one by copper, another one by crypto. Another one backed by government bonds. Then we have competition. They can have processes. They can have proofs of procedures that will outperform this one. This one might be faster. This one may offer more transparency. This one may be more widely accepted. But there's competition. And that's what this needs to be, a competition. The Federal Reserve has a monopoly. The Federal Reserve is unconstitutional. The Federal Reserve needs to be taken to court. The Federal Reserve needs to be sued. Congress, they issue money. Your congressman votes to issue too much money, then you vote him out next term. We can't vote out the Federal Reserve. We have to take him to court. That's what we need to do. The Federal Reserve is unconstitutional. Congress has the power to coin money. There needs to be competition. There needs to be competition. Let the Fed compete against other men. Against other organizations. Let it be a free market. Right now it's not a free market. The Federal Reserve has a monopoly. The Federal Reserve is unconstitutional. It's 2023 now. We have several different ways of communication. We have video calling done with the push of a button. We have money that can be transferred with the push of a button. Let people compete with the Federal Reserve. Get rid of the Federal Reserve. When I say get rid of the Federal Reserve, that means get rid of their monopoly. The Federal Reserve needs to end today. The Federal Reserve needed to end in 1913. There's no need for the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve is defunct. The Federal Reserve is bankrupt. The Federal Reserve has no power besides printing money. And in today's time, anybody can print money. The Federal Reserve is unconstitutional. The Federal Reserve is the reason why your dollar has been losing value over the last 100 years, since 1913. This is why you see inflation, because the Federal Reserve is stealing. Every time you hear the word inflation, you need to think Federal Reserve stealing from me. Because listen, that cow out there, the price has skyrocketed. That cow's not eating more grass. That cow's eating the same amount of grass as it did 1,000 years ago. Only difference is the Federal Reserve is stealing from you and it's causing you to think that that cow is somewhere or another more expensive because it's doing something different than it did 1,000 years ago. There's nothing changed about that cow from today to 1,000 years ago. It's the same cow. The only difference is your dollar is losing value to pay for that steak. And the reason why is because the Federal Reserve is printing more money. They are stealing from you. You're the sucker. The Federal Reserve has you cornered. You can't find a way out unless you go through the Federal Reserve. That's a monopoly, and that's anti-American. It's always been anti-American. The Federal Reserve is anti-American. The Federal Reserve is worse than Sam Bankman-Fried. Period. We only have one option. That option is to end the Federal Reserve. There's no other option at this point. We end the Federal Reserve. Point blank. Thank you for watching this video. I'm out.